I'm Rob of Rob Brooks Realty, and this is Doug Bogan, the property manager for Rob Brooks Realty. We're going to go over some of the aspects that an owner sees when their property is being managed. A lot of property owners that venture into property management don't know all the ins and outs, and so Doug and I are going to be talking about that so that you have a good picture of what you're stepping into if that's what you're about to do. Doug has been with Rob Brooks Realty and property management for how many years now? Have you been with? I'm trying to ask you how many years you've been with me.
About 5 years.
Okay, great. Yeah, so he does a really good job. Super detailed oriented guy. So I'm blessed to have you. Thank you for working with me. So let's go over some of the things that Rob Brooks Realty does, because that should inform you, owner, on what a property management company should be doing for you. So let's start from the top. Doug, why don't you just kind of talk through some of what we do?
Sure. Yeah, obviously there's a wide range of services. A lot of property management services people are very familiar with, others not so much. But of course, the first thing we do obviously is we actively advertise vacant or soon to be vacant listings. We put the properties obviously on the market for rent over a wide variety of websites. We put it in the multiple listing service with the local realtor association. And of course we do other traditional methods such as putting a sign in the yard and getting the word of mouth out.
Could you talk a little bit about the wide variety of websites? Because I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding. Like some may say, oh, you put it on this website, that should be good. Or they say you put it on these 30 and that should be good. May not be the case, because there's certain ones that are important for certain types of properties, right?
Oh, correct. Yeah, it's not necessarily about the quantity of websites it's on as much as the quality. Quantity is good, but it really depends on where that traffic is coming from. So of course, obviously, we're realtors, and we start by putting it in the multiple listing service, so other realtors that may have prospective tenants will be aware immediately that the property is on the market for rent. However, the listing will also be on a number of other local and national websites, including such websites as Zillow, Trulia, HotPads, Homes.com, Realtor.com, and several other of the most highly trafficked websites in the nation.
Good, and also some militaries and other types of sites too that these are syndicated to, correct?
Correct. So once again, of course, we advertise the properties we just discussed. Like I said, we promote the property and the realtor's multiple listing service to cooperating agents. So of course we provide a compensation fee as an incentive, and we try to provide a fee to any other realtors that might have a prospective tenant that's above the local industry average. So obviously they have a little bit more incentive to bring in a prospective tenant.
Right, for Rob Brooks Realty. Good. So it'll be important for you as owner to make sure that your property management company is compensating other real estate companies well if they bring in the prospective tenant that is good for your property. Go ahead, Doug.
All right. On top of that, of course, we will show the property to prospective tenants ourselves. The average tenant usually, quite often, will, because there's such a wide availability of websites these days and so much marketing done on the internet, a lot of people call us directly, and of course we take those calls and those emails and we field those prospective tenants to try to find the best person and set up appointments to show them the property, not only so they can see the property themselves, but obviously so that we can also get a feel for them in person in real time and get a feel for, is this going to be somebody that's going to be responsible and take care of your rental?
Good. Yeah, so there's some fielding that goes on, some qualifying of the tenant that goes in even before they look at the unit. Okay.
Correct, or even before they fill out an application.
Right. Okay, good.
Obviously, when a tenant does, a prospective tenant does make application, we of course review the application along with the owner, and we do a credit check, a background check, an eviction check. We also verify their income and employment, and of course field for any pets or animals that they would have living with them and the number of people that would be living in the unit. And of course we take all of that application information, review it, and then of course review it along with the owner as well so they can make the best educated decision possible.
Doug, you just went over about 8 or 9 qualifiers I mean, just rattled them off all in one sentence, having to do with the credit and having to do with past evictions or, a few other things there. Let me ask this. I know the answer, but for the benefit of the audience, how many forced evictions has Rob Brooks Realty had?
0.
0. And I would say is due mainly in part to your thoroughness on the application process. It is amazing what you do to make sure the tenant is a great tenant for our owners. And in fact, the mantra we have, we can even say it together: a bad tenant is worse than no tenant. Remember that, owner. A bad tenant is worse than no tenant. It's true every time. So we always make sure that tenant is good for your property. Okay, so sorry to interrupt, but I just think it's one of the things that we do best.
I would agree.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so obviously, say an application is passed through, the tenant's been approved, so obviously you're going to need paperwork. We supply a Florida Association of Realtors and attorney-endorsed lease for signature by the owner and the tenant. And what that means for you is obviously lease has to, of course, be drafted by someone with a license to practice law, an attorney that puts together a document for the landlord and the tenant to sign, so that you obviously want that document to have protections for you, the landlord. So this document, the lease we use, is supplied by the Florida Association of Realtors attorneys, and what that means is that they will come to bat if there's ever an issue or a discrepancy. We have the Florida Association of Realtors attorney backing us.
Great. Okay.
Obviously, once a lease is signed, then the tenant will be moving into the property, and rental funds have to be collected. So we collect the tenant's deposit and security deposit and hold it in an account compliant with the Florida Real Estate Commission, and maintain all of that accounting and legal escrow documentation that can otherwise be a real headache to keep a track of.
Great.
Of course, then we do a walkthrough and a move in with the tenant. We collect their funds, make sure we have certified funds, cashier's checks, money orders, what have you, knowing that we're getting actual money from the tenant. And then we, of course, move them in, get them keys, do a move-in inspection with the tenant. Obviously, every residential or commercial rental unit is different. Every home, for example, has certain things that need to be known as far as maintenance goes, like where the air conditioning filter is, what to do if there's a situation like where to turn off the water at the street to a property, how to operate this appliance, and so forth. And we make sure that we do a thorough job of walking the tenant through, just taking a little bit of extra time when they move in, not just handing them the keys and saying here you go, but taking time to walk them through the place and make sure they understand that even though they're not the owner of the property, that there are responsibilities that they not only signed off on, but that we've informed them of as well, to make sure they take care of the place, and we make that preventive measure.
A lot of times, some of that explaining things to the tenant works as a preventative measure. I mean, they can end up breaking something if they don't know how to operate, what needs to be done. So
absolutely. And we live in a certain area where a lot of tenants coming in are from other parts of the country. They may not be familiar with an air conditioning system or what have you.
Right. And we have different air conditioning systems here in the Deep South than what they may have in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So obviously, once we move the tenant in, obviously there's ongoing rent payment and so forth. So we make sure to collect the rent each month, make sure that the tenant pays on time. We remind the tenant, obviously, and collect any appropriate late fees or penalties if there is an issue and they don't pay on time. Obviously, our desire is that they do pay on time every time.
Definitely. Now, I think this is a good point to pause and just kind of talk about the difference between the amount of time we spend at the beginning in procuring the tenant versus how much time we spend, or you in particular spend, on a month-to-month basis once that tenant is in. How would you describe the difference between before the tenant's in with all the promotion, and then the application process, and then the tenant coming in, and then finally the tenant's in Now how much time are you spending? How would you weigh those two?
Oh, there is definitely a huge amount on the front end, and
Right.
definitely the maintaining over the long term. And if you're to average it out, obviously something critical hopefully should not happen every month with your property. If you average it out, there's a good amount of time spent on average every month dealing with repairs and other issues that come up. Definitely a lot of time on the front end, though.
Yeah, and I get the impression, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that watching you, that there's probably, you spend quite a bit of time each week on each property throughout the month, but maybe 4 times that amount of time
Absolutely.
before the tenant
Absolutely.
is there in the application and everything else. And one thing that we didn't cover, and maybe you were about to, is the move-in, move-out checklist for when that tenant moves in. Tell us a little bit about the move-in, move-out checklist and how that is super important to us in how we bring in the tenant.
Right. So yeah, good question. Obviously, it's very important to keep track and log the condition of a property, so you know what it was like before that tenant moved in. You definitely want to know what it should look like when they move out. So we have what we call our move-in, move-out condition checklist. Basically, we go down one side before a tenant moves in, and we mark down certain permanent defects, things like nail holes, marks on the wall, any sort of pre-existing damage, so we know exactly what kind of condition that unit is in before they move in. Mm-hmm. And then the other half of this move-in, move-out condition checklist, when the day comes they move out, we go back down that, of course, and fill out the other side. And if those two sides do not line up well, then the security deposit is in question.
Oh, correct. And in fact, just to give you owner a little bit of idea of how we do it, and maybe there may be other companies who do it this way too, I don't know, but for instance, you mentioned nail holes. On our move-in checklist, we have living room and we have walls, and then next to walls we have the number of nail holes that are in the living room walls, and so maybe there's 6, and so when that tenant moves out, on the other side of the sheet, we're filling out the same information: living room, walls. And if there are 9 nail holes in the wall, then, like you said, security deposit may be in question here. And the tenant knows this. They know this when they're hanging pictures, because they signed at the bottom of that checklist how the condition was. They signed that there were 6 nail holes in that living room wall.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so you were going on talking about and moving from that. The tenant has moved in, and you are now maintaining the property each month. Something's going on. You're taking care of this phone call and taking care of that. And you were about to go into more detail in that.
Yeah, well, as we were discussing, obviously, first of all, the most important priority is collecting rent and going over that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we give any appropriate notice to the tenant if there is any sort of willful act of non-payment,
Yeah.
and we move forward from there. When it comes to sending your money, and obviously you care about receiving your money, we assume quite a bit.
Right.
Obviously, what we do is we use a secure ACH direct deposit system so that you get your funds as soon as possible. So once that rent payment is processed, we turn that money right back around and we get it to you. And on top of that, we maintain a pad in our own escrow account of additional funds, so that if, say, something was to happen to be non-sufficient, or say the tenant's check bounces, that you can know that the money you get is good, that your funds will not bounce.
Great. The bank ACH is key. So the bank ACH has, most of our tenants now use the bank ACH to pay us. And rent is due on what day?
The first business day of the month.
Great. First business day of the month, so there's no 5th or 10th or something like that. And then, so what is our turnaround to get the money back to the owner?
Well, obviously the calendar is different every month, but depending on that, obviously once that payment has processed, usually you're talking about a few business days. Mm-hmm. We then turn it back around, initiate the payment, so that by the 9th or the 10th of the month, typically you have your funds in your account, depending on the calendar.
Yeah, and so that pad of account that we have, it keeps from when we do a quick turnaround to send you the money. If their money does not clear come into our bank, at least our check to you will not bounce because we have that pad in our account.
Absolutely. And on the subject, again, you mentioned it briefly about ACH. On the tenant side, we actually do supply an online payment system so the tenants can actually pay their rent online. And so many types of payments are going online these days. A lot of people don't even use old-fashioned checks anymore. And we have realized quite an increase in efficiency in collecting rent by maintaining that online system. Have a lot of compliments from tenants on that. And that's been a really efficient method of making sure we get that rent every month.
Great. Okay, good. What else you got?
Of course, obviously there's, as you mentioned earlier, periodic sort of the going on month-to-month long-term management of the property. We do such things as quarterly roadside examinations to ensure the property is well kept. So obviously we don't just hand the keys to the tenant and they live there and we don't check on the place or anything like that. Not that case at all. We go by and do a roadside examination quarterly, make sure the place is looking good. And you can tell a lot just from the property if a tenant is taking care of the place or not.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, and so we do that, and then we also go into the house on a periodic basis as well.
Correct. We do, of course, we do more, and we do in-depth interior and exterior inspections as well, just to make sure that things are going smoothly and the tenant is continuing to be responsible.
Right, and so we do those times. Usually that turns out to be twice a year that we do the interior inspections as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, what else can you tell us about what Rob Brooks Realty Property Management does?
Sure, absolutely. Of course, as you kind of mentioned already, and it sounds like a simple one sentence line of how we handle service, but we obviously field all tenant complaints and repair calls, and that sounds real simple, but obviously it can be very in depth. You want your property manager to be able to take a simple phone call and hopefully be able to remedy certain situations for the lowest cost possible. For example, tenants may call up and they may think they have an issue or a problem with, say, their water heater or their air conditioner or their stove. There may not be a problem at all. I get calls every week. Someone, they threw electrical breaker by accident, or forgot to turn something on, and obviously if there's a chance that we can keep from sending a repair person out and save you money, that's what we're going to do. So we try to keep that savvy about us to be able to give them that sort of over the phone tech support, so to speak, to try to eliminate that issue. And of course, if there is something wrong or more serious, then we're quick to get a repair person out to take a look at things.
Yeah. Doug, I've heard you on many of these phone calls, and when that tenant calls in and the tenant says, my hot water heater is not working, and you say, I'm sorry to hear that, you show empathy for the tenant, and you say, by the way, have you checked, and you start running through a few different questions, not to harass the tenant, but just to see if you can save the owner $80, because it might just be a plumber goes out there and says, oh, the switch was flipped, click, and then that's it. And so you go through that, and then and you get these calls all the time. I mean, and a lot of times they're legitimate. Yep, we got to send a repair person out there. In those situations, what happens when we send that repair person out there? What does the process look like there?
Will depend on the scenario, obviously. Hope they're able to fix the problem in short notice. But so we make sure that the repair person, and we use bonded and licensed contractors that have a good track record with us, that do a good job for a fair price.
Mm-hmm. And honest.
Honest.
We keep that.
Absolutely.
We keep a list of honest, fair, honest and then fair with the price contractors to use. Okay, keep going.
Absolutely. So we make sure, of course, depending on the scenario, that the contractor is able to get into the house in an efficient manner. They're able to take care of the problem, and we communicate with them to make sure that the problem has been resolved.
Okay, good. And so sometimes that might take several or maybe even many calls, and then the owner is notified when? of the repair that needs to happen?
Depending on the situation, obviously, if it's something small under $300, we generally take care of that ourselves. So that, that problem is taken care of. That's what you want us there for, obviously, is to handle the small stuff, so you don't have to get involved. If there is something more critical, something it's an emergency or more major as far as dollars go, obviously, then you're contacted as soon as we know what the issue is or that it exists, so that you can make appropriate decisions.
Right. Good. Anything else that you want to share with the audience of owners here?
Yeah, absolutely. A few last things. Of course, we of course send a monthly statement out to you, just verifying that your payment has gone to you. When we do those quarterly roadside examinations, we of course send a picture to you as well, quarterly of the of your property, so you can see the condition for yourself. Any invoices from minor repairs here or there that occur, of course we forward those to you for your records as well. And at the end of the year, we supply a 1099 statement for your tax purposes, and also an annual statement of all rent and expenses you've had, so you don't have to try to keep up with it yourself throughout the year.
Great. Doug, I sure do appreciate your time. And for those of you who are owners thinking about using your property in property management, I just want to thank you for your time and watching this video. You're welcome to give Doug or I a call at any time. The number is there on the website for you to use, or email if you like. We see our role at Rob Brooks Realty Property Management as being servants to you. We see where this is your property and it needs to be taken care of in a very good manner. And so it's your property and our time. And so whatever tenant goes in there, it has to be a great fit for all of us. And so we're we spend a lot of time just making sure that the property is well taken care of by the tenant, especially by making sure that a good tenant goes in there to begin with. So I'm Rob and this is Doug. We're with Rob Brooks Realty Property Management. Thank you for watching.